Just want to remind everyone of the Jumbo Plush campaign going on. We've got the massive BRICS organization as well as the European Union. Head over to makeship.com using that first link in the description down below before they're gone forever. Speaking of which, here's contribution to global GDP growth. We have the G7 versus BRICS. BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So starting in the year 2000, so BRICS was only contributing 18% at this time. That compared to the G7, which is an international economic forum between Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK and the US. That was a mouthful. So the G7 in the year 2000 was contributing 43% of GDP growth. Then here are the numbers 10 years later as BRICS jumps up to 26%. Meanwhile, the G7 goes down to 34%. Here are the percentages in the year 2020 where the G7 and BRICS are tied. Finally, in the modern day, G7 has dropped below 30%. Meanwhile, BRICS continues to rise very slowly. The BRICS organization combined now contributes over 30 trillion. And one of the big reasons for that are all the new members that just joined. You have Saudi Arabia, Argentina, the UAE, Egypt, Iran, and Ethiopia. Actually, Argentina no longer in it, but everyone else is. So these are overall concerning numbers. Meanwhile, there's still like the rest of the world. I wonder if they're going to come up with their own organization, just a big giant, kind of like a non-aligned movement during the Cold War. Thing is, BRICS has all the population on their side. They're only going to continue to grow. Meanwhile, the G7 nations, they're having the opposite problem. Definitely expect to see more growth out of India in the next 10 years. Percentage of respondents who feel their country takes too many migrants. The big one being Greece, where 90% of respondents said yes, which in 2021 they took 23,000, and Greece's current population is at 10 million basically. Overall though, this map is over 50% in pretty much every country. Even the lower ends of the spectrum, Hungary is at 54% and Denmark at 57%. There's also the island of Cyprus at 84%. Interesting that Estonia is slightly higher than the rest of their Baltic brothers. Turkey is probably at 100%. Yeah, I'm really curious about some of the numbers out of the UK, Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. I mean, if the trends follow, it's probably going to be over 50% like all these other countries. What's interesting is some of these countries don't take in as many migrants as other countries in the EU, yet they still have very high rates of dissatisfaction. The income a family needs to live comfortably in the US, based on 2 working adults with 2 children. Now, I do live in California. I am not married. To live comfortably with a family of 4, I would probably say this is about right. Maybe it's a little high, but to be honest, I don't know exactly how expensive kids are, so maybe it's correct. Look at Colorado being not that much lower than California. Of course, the Pacific states as a whole really high up there. It really seems like a proximity to California effect. All the states that border California relatively high. Surprisingly, Florida at only 200,000. Well, then there's also Texas at only 200,000 too. The highest on this list though is Massachusetts at 300K. That is insane that you'd have to spend $300,000 a year for a family of 4. No wonder no one is choosing that lifestyle. Like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm just like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. This is why I don't want to do it. The lowest state would be Mississippi, but it's Mississippi. This is coming from a person that was born in Alabama. So yeah, Hawaii also pretty high up there, but they are not the highest. Really surprised that even Alaska is pretty high. Like, dang, you'd think they'd try to offset the fact that you would literally freeze up here by at least making it cheap, but no. It's probably just because they have to import so many other resources up there. Meanwhile, average household income, 70K. This map might be taking a lot of liberties with that word comfortably. Like, some of these families are living real comfortably. Like, they're eating good. You can definitely still afford it below these numbers. How different people around the world get around, or what type of transportation are they using exactly? Of course, in North America, we have pretty much just car-dependent infrastructure. 92% of people are just using cars. That compared to Central America and South America, where car use is way lower. Now, this isn't necessarily a good thing. They might not have any other option, but interestingly, those numbers are pretty similar when compared to Europe. You still see really high rates of walking, but even with Europe's really good public transportation, it's still not necessarily getting over 30. In Eastern Europe, it does. That's the only outlier. Finally, there's Asia. In Southeast Asia and Western Asia, they are using cars more often than others. In Southeast Asia, think like Cambodia, Vietnam. In Western Asia, you can think the Middle East or the Caucasus Mountain region. This is the really shocking number though, 46% in Eastern Asia. So think Japan, South Korea, and China. That's the highest there is on this whole chart. This really just shows the drastic difference North America is to the rest of the world, really. And there's so many different reasons to explain this. I don't even think I can begin to do it. Yeah, I wonder what classifies cars in this chart. Americans drive so much that they have 101% mobility. Amazing. The world's best airline companies. I don't know if I'm gonna agree with this. So based on safety, it's Qantas. Oceania just doing well in general, because here's New Zealand. There's Qatar Airways, Singapore Airlines, TAP Air. I could think of a specific Alaska Airlines event that isn't that safe, but based on fleet size or amount of aircraft, American Airlines winning with almost 1,000. Then there's another American company, Delta. Then United. Wow, we just have so many planes. Then Southwest. Finally, an international company. Here's China, 2 Chinese companies. Airways, Ryanair in Ireland, the Chinese company, Turkish Airlines, Luftwaffe, that's something else, based on Skytrack Awards, whatever that is. Finally, based off revenue, Delta has the most. I do enjoy flying Delta. That's probably my go-to. But also, in general, American companies are just making a lot. Lufthansa, Air France, Southwest. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with the thing we just talked about. In the US, we don't really have public transit and people don't really walk, so it's all about cars, and then when the distance is too far for a car, everyone just uses planes. So this shouldn't be that surprising. Ironic that customer satisfaction is not even on the board. We got the US just destroying in highest revenue and biggest fleet size. Meanwhile, yeah, awards and safety, they're nowhere to be found in the top 3. Aircraft carriers by country. The top are going to be NATO members. Obviously, the US with the most at 11. These are 11 aircraft carriers in service. There are more. Keep in mind how insane aircraft carriers actually are. I mean, they are literally like giant floating cities in the ocean. They can fit 5,000 sailors, and they've been called cities at sea. Not to mention the 90 aircraft they have on board. So the fact that the US has 11 is really insane. France has 1, meanwhile Italy has 2. Spain and Turkey have 1. The UK have 2. Now we have some of the biggest non-NATO members with aircraft carriers. China with 3. Japan with 2. Russia with 1. Even Thailand having 1. I didn't know about that. Finally, India with 2. I mean, having just 1 is such a big deal for a country. They hold so much power. Also, keep in mind, not every aircraft carrier is built equally. This is that one that Thailand has compared to what the US has. In the last 20 years, which country has given your country the most points in Eurovision? Again, Eurovision is a song contest where every year countries compete to see who has the best. So the Swiss have actually voted most for Germany in the last 20 years. Even though the Swiss people speak German, French, and Italians, I guess they've chosen their actual favorites. Interestingly, Armenia has given France the most points. The island of Malta has given Italy the most, which they kind of have a connection. Azerbaijan giving Malta the most. Wow, way to return the favor there, Spain. Portugal always votes for Spain. Meanwhile, it's the Swiss that votes for Portugal the most. Good old British Isle brotherhood. Okay, so maybe the rivalry doesn't go that deep. Same goes for the lowlands with Belgium and the Netherlands. UK loves voting for Poland. One of the only ties on this list, it's the Austrians and the Dutch that vote for Switzerland the most. Slovenia votes for Croatia, meanwhile Serbia votes for Slovenia. Oh, France and Turkey. Of course, Belarus loves to vote for Russia. Meanwhile, the Norwegians kind of all over the place, surprisingly. There's actually a lot to be said about this map. Those diplomatic friendships clearly extend into the song contest as well. McDonald prices have literally doubled as of 10 years ago. The angry boomer in me is going to come out looking at this. We're comparing the 2014 price to the 2024 price. I never used to understand why old people would get mad at price increases. Now I get it. A McChicken used to cost $1, now it's $3. That's actually the biggest increase by percentage. Then a McDouble sandwich went from $1.19 to now $3.19. Medium fries from like $1.50 to $3.79. The big one, the quarter pounder with cheese, used to cost $5, now it's literally $11. That is insane. Percentage-wise, it's not like a huge jump, but that price, like you can't even really go to McDonald's without like for sure spending like 15, 20 bucks. When I was in high school, there was literally the dollar menu. That's where you take dates on right there. That's Oreo McFlurry, now almost $5. Dude, this Baba Booey. Oh my God. When looking at different categories, the way they judge inflation, fast food has had like a major increase. Like some categories haven't inflated their prices that much. I think like cell phones, I think have actually gone down. And then of course there's TVs that have significantly gone down. Like I don't really care about anything else. Do something about this. Stop buying fast food at these insane prices. That's something. The problem is also grocery prices have also gone up. Evolution of the alphabet, starting from almost 4,000 years ago, where the alphabet was kind of just more fun, cute little pictures. I wish we went back to this. Wait, actually, maybe not. We've got the Phoenician alphabet from 1000 BCE. You can see as some of the former characters have been slightly adapted. I mean, some of them are direct lifts, though. This T basic looking thing. Now we're starting off with Old Greek. Now you're going to start to see where our current alphabet is beginning to form, and also how certain characters have literally just been stopped in the evolution. They also added some characters. Here's Latin from 500 BCE. Again, there are a lot of similarities between Greek and Latin alphabets, but they did make up some changes. I can literally see what's forming here. You should be able to see. Here's the Roman alphabet, which is literally A, B, C, D. You can kind of see it all. The only thing is it doesn't have all the letters. And then the modern Latin script, we lifted mostly the Roman alphabet. We added a J, added the V and W. Well, and that's about it. I find it interesting that we stopped these 3 letters in Old Greek, but then the Romans like basically brought it back, kind of. This is saying it evolved from this like Y. The Y made a V and then a Y, but I can literally see the Y like right here. This old I eventually evolves into a Z weirdly. Meanwhile, this becomes like the more permanent I. It also makes a J. This is actually insane. I had no idea. I didn't think it worked out this naturally. Now I want to see the evolution of like the Cyrillic alphabet, all the other alphabets. Big ups for my boy T. Dude's been on point since they invented letters. I became Z and Z became became I. In a way, the alphabet hasn't really changed for like 2,000 years. Maybe a little bit, but not much. Worldwide life expectancy from the year 1800, 1950, and 2015. So unsurprisingly, about 225 years ago, life expectancy was somewhere between 25 years old and 40 years old. Even in the Americas, 35 years old, Europe 34 years old. They were having a lot of wars at that time. Then there's the year 1950, just after the end of World War II. Life expectancy jumps in the US and Canada to 68 years old. It also hovers around there in most of Europe, which is interesting because you don't instantly see the divide between Eastern and Western Europe because we are in the Cold War. Africa has actually improved since the 1800s, but only by like, I think 8 years, or 10 years to be exact, after 150 years overall. Bolivia is still significantly lower than some of their neighbors. Also, Latin America is still kind of catching up. South Asia is still in the 30s. China not doing much better at this time. Australia and New Zealand are, though. Finally, there's more recent times. I think the US is still hovering around 79 years old life expectancy wise. There's a lot of places that are a lot better, Canada included, and a lot of places in Europe just in general. What I find really fascinating is the explosion out of South Korea. In the 1950s, they were pretty much the same as their neighbors at only 47. They practically double in like 50 years. And everyone talks about the growth of South Korea, but it's still impressive to look at. Latin America has also had some crazy improvements. Look at Costa Rica at 80. There's still some catching up to do in South Asia and Africa, Indonesia, and the Philippines. As of the last 8 or 9 years, though, some of the places that have struggled have increased. Well, the US has stayed the same. But parts of the world has seen some improvement. Of course, there are places that have gone down, like Afghanistan. Big thanks to my patrons this month. Kansas was mentioned. KingBearHaze. JohnDenver. I can't sleep without Drew's voice. DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood. Archaeology. aPhatNarwhal. Carmel S. Connor Pavlik. DOOCHBAGGINS.
Fredrik
LuxembourgLover.
Traven.
Tambre friend.
KirinoIsBestGirl.
Sebby, if you hear this, I love you.
The Mexican
and
760.
ZaneyBoi.